Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious about what this is, or you've got a bit lost. Welcome, everyone. I'm Chatty, and this is my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter. I'll be chatting away madly, hopefully, succinctly, and quickly about everything I read in January. I feel it's like the third time that I've kind of sat down to try and film this video, and then for one reason or another, like, something else has happened and I've not had enough time and it's just been interrupted. But I really want to get it done because then I can move all my January books away and just have my February books like present, so I can kind of enjoy picking a few different ones up and putting them down. Yes, there's a lot to talk about. I didn't read all of them, don't worry. Some of them I'm like partly reading, so I will talk about those. But January was a bit tricky. It's always a bit crazy because you've got the remnants of Christmas. In our family, we've then got the chaos of going back to school for 3 people in my family. I'm the only one that is not going back to school. So that always feels a little bit crazy. And then it's my Mad March Hare's birthday, which involves a lot of planning and attention. So I'm quite often too exhausted to read. So I found myself with 2 books that I'd nearly finished but hadn't actually finished anything when I'd got to the middle of the month, which is usually when I do my first wrap up. So I was like, there's no point. There's barely anything for me to talk about. Let's just do it all in one go. But now we're here and I'm like, there's a lot of books to talk about. So we're going to crack on. I'm just going to give myself some courage by drinking tea because that's definitely a thing. Definitely a thing. Yep, no, nice warm heat. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's not going to be terrible at all. I am going to remember things about the books to say, but I'm not going to waffle on. It's going to be fine. So, cheers everyone. I don't edit on this channel, hence why I'm scared, because my laptop is decrepit. So we just do a one shot and there is no editing. So, cheers everybody. Clink, clink, clink. One shot from a tiny teacup gimmick. There we go. Right. I am also, so I'm going to talk about everything I read. This is my books. And then I have a pile of stuff that I've been reading with my children that I'm also going to talk about as well. Because when I first started my channel, I spoke about that. And then I stopped kind of talking about that. And it's actually something that I do want to talk about again. So I'm going to try and include that. But that'll be at the end. So if you're not interested, you can then just leave the video. That works. I have timestamps for everything. So if there's a book you're not interested in or you want to hear nothing about, then feel free to skip around. That's what the timestamps are for, because this will be long, even though I'm trying to be succinct. And also, please do look in the description box because I have linked all of the Storygraph links to the books, unless for some reason they're not available, and then I'll have used another link. So then you can give yourself any kind of, there's a word, trigger warnings. There you go. Then you can check the trigger warnings for any of these books and give yourself a better synopsis, because I like going into my books knowing as little as possible. So I'm not going to kind of do a massive kind of run through of the plot, just more talking about how I felt about the books. Right, let's crack on. And I'm going to talk about all the books that I've kind of partly read, but not fully read. So the first is a reread. This is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. So I'm still currently reading this one and loving my reread of this. I think as well, like, I haven't read any epic fantasy this month, so I think I was really missing it, which is why I definitely was keen to pick this up and start reading, even though I still had some other books that I needed to finish off. And yeah, it's just so nice to be back in this world. I still have the same connections to the characters. I'm still feeling like freaked out by certain things, even though I know what was happening. And I'm definitely glad that I am rereading this before going straight into The Hunger of the Gods, because I read this in May 2021, so well over a year ago. And reading it and I'm like, oh, they're mentioned gods, and I'm like, I really want to know which god animal that was linked to. So there's lots of things that I'm wanting to know about and try and just get my brain set in a certain way because of certain side characters that have characteristics that link to that. So all of that wonderful world building stuff, I'm just enjoying diving back into there. And it is such an immersive world. Like, you're in here and it's so vivid and there's so much attention to detail, and Really, really enjoying being back in here. So hopefully I will finish this one up, and around the end of around the end of February, beginning of March, I really hope to start my buddy read with Mason from Mason in the Dark. Blank moment there. Because we're going to read The Hunger of the Gods together, so I'm really excited about that. The next book I started reading, this is the book that came in the post from the Shelterbox book club. So it is called Wall Gardens, and it is by a name that I'm going to butcher, so I'm so sorry. Lalage Snow. I do apologise about the pronunciation. So it's Wall Gardens, a journey through conflict in search of calm. Now, usually what happens is I get these and I put them on the shelf and go, I'm gonna read them when I'm at that point where I kind of want a book that is gonna make me think or push me in a different direction to what I usually read. Pardon me. But I'm not currently part of a book club at the moment. So they do have like a book club element to this. They have like a timetable of when they're going to have sort of online discussions and like live video discussions and interviews with the author. So I thought this year I'm going to try and fit it in to my reading and watch all of those and take part in them. But I've barely got into this book. I'm 15 pages. And I think it's just going to be a bit too dry for me. So I need, in a non-fiction book, I need kind of something to focus my attention on that gives me an emotional connection. And I think, while I think this is definitely going to be a book that's kind of good for you, that's a lot of work for me. And it's going to feel like a chore to read because I'm going to have to work harder at it. And that feels too much like schoolwork. I am reading for enjoyment and because I want to be gripped, not because I think I should read it. When I have more time in my life and I'm in that zone, great. But I'm not. But I might see if other people I know are interested in reading this and pass it on to them. But I really think that I'm not. I'm going to try and give maybe another few pages and see. But I'm pretty certain that I think this is just too dry for me and we're just not compatible. With the Book Shelter book box, they give you a little bit of information about the author at the top. And then they kind of tell you about, so if the book's kind of got a theme, for example, like this one's about like green spaces and things in war zones. And here it's a story about a woman in Ukraine who is growing her own plants, and as we know, sadly at the moment Ukraine is a war zone, and Shelter do a lot of work all around the world, so it kind of tells you about the work they're doing as well. So I like to keep these in the book. I'm currently using it as a bookmark. So whoever I pass it on to, I will keep that bit of paper in there for them so they can kind of learn more about it. Okay, 2 more books that I'm in the middle of. So one is Children's Middle Grade, The Girl Who Speaks Bear. This is a fantasy, and it is by Sophie Anderson. And this book, I have started it, and I am excited, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because this is part of a project. So one of the reasons that I kind of delayed picking this up is because I have this idea of a project. There will be a video coming out. If it's already out, I will link it. If not, I will go back and link it so you can see what that is. So I was waiting for another book to come in before I got to this one. So I've barely started, but I'm now currently reading it. That is now one of my priority books that I'm reading. Also, it's a polar fantasy, so it kind of links to the Polathon that is happening this week, I think. First week of February, so yeah, this week. And then this is just a stand-in because I have an audiobook. I am listening to the memoir Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And I'm halfway through it, and I've paused it for the moment because I think I just need to be in the right space to keep listening. But it's such an amazing book. I heard so many good things about it, and I knew it was going to be amazing. I knew it was going to feel difficult at certain times, and it definitely has been. So for anyone who doesn't know, Chanel Miller is a rape survivor, and the book, it's it's not on page because she was not aware. She woke up and found herself in a hospital. So and has blank memory. So it's kind of her journey through what it was like to go through that, and also what it was like to go through the court system, and what it was like for her family to go through the court system. And I'm only halfway through, and they've gone through one part of the court system with the with the verdict, and then there's still more kind of like, it's like it's not finished. There's still a lot more to go, and I'm feeling concerned for her at this point. Like, it's not a massive thing, but it's still a thing that's made me feel annoyed on her behalf. And I'm like, I think I just need a break at the moment. But I have been listening to it whilst I've been doing chores around the house and whilst I've been walking, and it is narrated by Chanel Miller as well, and her voice is so clear and calming, and it's so good hearing her tell the story in her way and in her words. And she's so eloquent, and she's really funny, and it's just really good. Like, just the way she tells it and everything she kind of goes through, and how she kind of gives you a lot of imagery about how she feels, or how it felt, or how people judge certain things, is just really beautifully done. So I'm really enjoying it, but it is obviously it's a really heavy topic, and it is quite a hard read, and I also had quite a few heavy topics this month. So I'm just having a little break, but I'm in the middle of that, and it is incredible, and I do highly recommend it. But obviously, because it's a heavy subject, massively check the trigger warnings and see if it's for you. Okay, so everything else is everything that I read this month, and there are 8 books to go through. Just going to rearrange. There we go. Get them a little bit neater. I'm just going to have a tea break as well. So at the start of the month, I was reading 2 middle grades. So I have Rumblestar by Abby Elphinston, and I have Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. Rumblestar I buddy read with Vadania from Vadania Silverscribe, and she whipped through this a lot quicker than I did. It is the first book in the Unmapped Chronicles, which is a portal fantasy, and we both really loved it. We both really, really loved this book. So this is just such a classic children's fantasy. It has a lot of that kind of magical feeling that you would have experienced as a child reading Narnia for the first time, and just that concept of going to a magical place and just the kind of wonder and amazement. It has a lot of that feeling in here, and there's a lot of beings that feel threatening, and beings that feel kindly, and beings that you're not sure which way they are. But there is so much magical whimsy in here. We're also following 2 protagonists who have their own journeys to go on, so there's some really good character arcs. I feel really empathetic towards the characters, so that is Casper Tock and his friend. Utterly Thankless. There we go. So there's Casper and Utterly. Casper is from our world, and he stumbles into the world of the Unmapped Chronicles, and Utterly is from that world. And there is both different things going on for both of them, and they manage to work out things about themselves and be stronger people coming out the end of it. And it's so heartwarming. There is definitely kind of a danger threat here. Bravery is shown as courageous without them doing any kind of like crazy foolish risks. So like, it's brave because they need to be, not because they've decided to just wander off on an adventure kind of feeling, if that makes sense. I think sometimes when you read some middle grade books and you're like, that is not a good decision, why are you doing that? The way this was done, it was sensible sounds so boring, but they were sensible. They were sensible about it. And there was definite like, what's the word? Yeah, you definitely felt the kind of danger, and you felt the difficulties of the situation they were in. But we have magical boats, we have magical balloons, we have sentient balloon, we have a sentient carpetway at one point, and also just like magical devices, like magical gadgets. Like for example, like there's a chest where if you tell it a joke, it will then provide you with food, and things like that. You also go through, there is a map, because we love a map. So here we go. We have a map of the kingdom here. And they do travel around on this map, visiting these places. And it's so beautifully thought through. And I am so much looking forward to seeing where the rest of the series goes and what we meet. So they are kind of companion novels. So this is the first story about these two children and their adventure. Then the next one will be still part of that world and the overarching plot, but it'll be about two different protagonists and so on. There are currently 4 out. I feel there should be a 5th because of the different parts of the world being explored, but we don't know at the moment whether or not that is. But I loved this, and I absolutely cannot wait to be reading this with my children. It really gives you those such wonderful, warm, magical vibes, and just really positive, inspiring messages as well. It's just so delightful. I think I plunked them down. It's been so long since I've done a wrap up. I was like, do I put it back on the shelf? Do I put it on the floor? What do I do? I've forgotten. So the next book I was reading, so I was reading this one and that one alongside it. So this is Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse, which is the 3rd book in the first Percy Jackson series, which is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. The second Percy Jackson series has more of a YA feel to it. This one is very much middle grade. So by now we're very much kind of established with Percy and his friends and his world and kind of the overarching plot. So this picks up a little bit after where the second book did, like more characters are established, so we get to meet a new character. Well, more than a new character. We meet one new character we briefly saw at the end of the second book, and then we are introduced to more demigods and more parts of the world. We get to meet more of the other Greek gods, more of the other titans, and of course there's a prophecy. There's something that needs stopping, and all of it is kind of working towards the plot as a whole over this series that I imagine is going to kind of I've read these before, that culminates at the end of the 5th book. So this was a really fun reread. It's really easy to read. It's very nostalgic, and I had a great time reading it. Okay, moving on to books that I hadn't read before. So like I mentioned, listening to Know My Name, it felt very, very heavy. But at the same time, I decided I really, really did want to finally read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which I was also very aware was probably going to was definitely going to be dealing with heavy topics as well. This book is incredible. It's absolutely agree with all of the hype around it. It's so good at managing all of the themes in this book, and you really resonate with the characters. And it took me by surprise at lots of moments. Like, I knew roughly the premise of what this is all about, but when the event happens, like, it still shocked me. And it's what's so clear at the beginning of the book is about how black children are raised completely differently to white children. I'd say especially in America, because this is an American story. I don't know if a similar thing is done in England, because that's not my lived experience. But definitely in here, the way that they teach their children, you need to have your hands on display when you are stopped by a police officer. Not if you are stopped, when you are stopped. And that is never a conversation that would ever be had with me. It's just awful the way that this is a very normal conversation and a normal thing that Black families will have with each other to make sure their children understand the world they're living in and how to survive. And it's terrible. It's terrible. And I feel terrible for having no idea about any of this. And I just thought, and that's just one small thing. This book is full of so much in here, as well as dealing with racism, especially kind of like institutionalized racism. It also looks at classism as well, and the concept of safety in a neighborhood and different choices people make, but also it looks at how much are you worth. And this also echoes things that I was also reading about in Chanel Miller's Know My Name, where are you worth more if you are, you know, thought to be someone who is in education, who has a job, who is a successful, worthwhile human, rather than someone who is out of work, who drinks, or who might be into drug dealing? Does that make your life lesser than someone who is in a different situation? Is it inevitable that you would be either, you know, raped or shot in those situations? It's that value of what we place on human life for different people that is astounding. And I think both stories explore that really, really well. And I think it's something that we should think about. I think it's something that we, as humans, we innately judge people. That's how we make sense of the world. We will judge people. But what is important is to be aware that we do that, and be aware of being more reflective, and being more aware that we need to change our minds about people. And also, even though we are judging people, we need to go, that shouldn't matter in how I treat you. And I think it's so beautifully looked at in here. There was so much in here that was just incredible. As well as like exploring all of those issues, you also have a really empathetic main character in here, and her difficulty of that she feels she's got to censor herself, of how she might be judged in her different communities. So she goes to a middle class, mainly white, well, I think there's like one other Black kid, and then a few Asian children. So mainly white middle class school. But she comes from a Black neighborhood where they are more working class. And she kind of she feels like she's kind of not fully herself in either of those places, because there's different sides to herself. And so she feels like she's constantly censoring herself, particularly in school, because she needs to be viewed a certain way. And the more you kind of read about it, and the more you kind of understand the institutionalized racism, it makes a lot of sense as to why. And it is definitely something that we should talk about a lot more, about how we treat people because of our perception of them. I really love the family in this. There is such a warm family home that she comes from, but it's not without its difficulties. There are kind of other aspects to it as well. And so there are certain family members that they kind of struggle. So you're kind of looking at certain tensions in them and the way they play out. And I think it's all done so beautifully. She really looks at all sides of the Black experience, and the experience of the incident that happens in here of someone being shot by a police officer. A Black boy being shot by a police officer. She really looks at all the different people that could be involved in that, different backgrounds people come from, and how they would then view things. And it's just so beautifully done. It's still very gripping, and it's still very what's the word? There's moments of lightheartedness in here as well. So even though the topics are really heavy, you know, there's moments of family fun, there's moments of Black joy in here, as well as the difficulties. And I think that's why this book has so much love, because there is such a range going on in here. Although unfortunately there's just such a lovely moment where it's so beautiful of family life, and then it gets interrupted by stuff, and it really got me. Like, those moments really got me, and I felt all the feelings in here that I was supposed to feel. I felt angry, I felt empowered, I felt like I wanted to get my megaphone, I felt delighted for the things that she does in here and how she refuses not to back down about things. And it also explores as well one thing that I thought was really good to look at, and that was, although this might not be your experience, like for example it's really not mine, and I'm never going to fully understand what it is like I'm never going to have that, which is my privilege to not have that, but what I can do is listen. Even if I'm never going to completely understand it, I can listen and try. And I think that's the important thing for if you're reading this and you're white, to take away from this. There's some really good examples of two different characters in here that don't get it, and one that is willing to learn, and one that will constantly be in denial about it. It's like, I'm not racist, you're just being really sensitive. Like, that's not racist, how dare you say I'm racist? And rather than thinking about what you're actually being told and how that made people feel and listening, there's just this constant denial of, no, I'm right and you're not going to make me feel like that about myself. There's no self-examination there. So that was really, I thought that was a really good reflection of society as well. So yes, there's a lot in this book. There is a lot in this book, and it was brilliant, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it to everyone. Okay. After all of that, the heavy, it was so nice to pick up Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert, which is a contemporary romance. However, there are themes in here of living with anxiety, of past trauma and grief, of past relationship difficulties, of self-worth. So do be aware of those when coming into it. But it's done in a really, trying to find the right word, compassionate way, I think. Like, it's very gentle. It kind of leads you into it. It's not suddenly slam and shock. It's very kind of gentle and nurturing. And what I love the most about this book is that it is really, it's got such a healthy attitude to being in a relationship and that open communication. And I think that is the thing that made this book work really well for me, because I think quite a lot of romance, you always hear about the miscommunication trope, and there isn't a miscommunication in here. It's a trying to understand where other people are coming from and trying to explain how you feel when it's a hard concept to grasp. And it's definitely was for me, because I've not had the experience. Well, I've not had the experience of either of the characters in here, but there's definitely one experience here that I couldn't understand, but I was trying to as much as I could. And it was very clear that both of their feelings are very, very valid. And it explores that in the book. And it also explores that they need to give and take a lot more. And they want to, and they're willing to. And that's why this relationship works so well. So I love a book with a healthy relationship. And this definitely was. But what I do definitely appreciate about this book was that it made me laugh. I needed it. I needed to laugh. And within the first chapter, I was hysterical. I was just hysterical about something that happened in the first chapter. It just really tickled me. I mean, I'm not sure if that's everyone's reaction to this, but my immediate reaction was like, has anyone read this? Did you find that be really funny? So there's some wonderful kind of awkward moments, but because we get to see in both characters' head, so we have Danica Brown and we have Zafir, and we have Zafir, we get to see in both of their heads and how they kind of view certain situations. And it's just really delightful to kind of hang out with them. There's a really good representation, I think, of mental health, of body positivity, of sex positivity. So I think this is a really fun book, and definitely if you need something light to pick up and you enjoy romance, it's definitely one that I really enjoyed, and I'm not a romance reader. Okay, on to another buddy read that I had with Vadania Silverscribe, which is Violet Made of Thorns. So this is a buddy read, also with Chloe from Phantom Pages. We all are lucky enough to be currently on the list for the Fairy Loot YA boxes, and we thought it'd be fun to read some of the books together because we've all of us have got quite a lot of them that aren't read yet, and they're so pretty. So I love this. I love the cover with the sunset. I'm a sucker for a sunset or a sunrise. I really think they're beautiful. And the title, Violet Made of Thorns, we've got it interwoven with some violets and thorns. La da da da. This is YA Fantasy by Gina Chen. Yeah, by Gina Chen. And it has got these beautiful edges that go from dark navy purpley to this sort of like orangey coral sunset. We've got these, taking out all my fairy loot bits. We've got some really nicely illustrated end pages. So that is Violet in her tower. And here we go. We have the prince approaching the tower. And then we have this wonderful rooftop scene. I love when you take this, the cover off, and the naked hardback has got a printed drawing of, again, the sunset at night and these wonderful towers and rooftops of the skyline within this city. So this started off really fun. We have this magical kingdom that is surrounded by a fairy wood, and we have a fate. There's a prophecy that is foretelling doom, and it all kind of hangs on the balance of people's decisions. And our protagonist is a seer to the court, and her job is to look for the future and use it to try and help the kingdom. However, the king very much uses this as propaganda and kind of encourages her to allow leeway for the truth to be one thing or another, and maybe push it in a certain direction that he would like it to go into. So there is sort of a hate to love aspect within the story, and we have some fun side characters, and you're sort of not too sure what way the plot's going or what way you think it's going to unravel. But as we approach the end, it seemed even more confusing. There was some action with some magical creatures. The heroine, yeah, see, it's got, I always say protagonist, but it's got to this, it's so fairy tale-y, and so I'm using heroine and hero. The protagonist, Violet, is very cynical, and while that was kind of fun for the beginning, it didn't really go anywhere. Like, she never changed that part of her character. And the same for some of the other ones. They didn't. I felt very much like we were getting to a point where they were going to grow and change, but we never got that point. And the love to hate relationship very much kind of went attraction and lust and hatred still combined. There was no kind of friendship or care or anything like that, which made me not invest in them and stop caring about the story. And then the motives of them were just highly confusing at the end, and we lost the fun characters. They were just glimmers of them at the end, and the focus was on the two, and I just kind of stopped caring, and it just kind of was very muddled. So unfortunately I did not enjoy this one by the end, and I'm not going to be rereading it. I'm not going to be carrying on with the series, and I'm going to have to say goodbye to this beautiful book, because if I'm not rereading it, there's no point keeping it in my house. It's just taking up shelf space, of which other things could go there. So that was a shame. But hopefully we will have better luck with some of the other books that we read, and they will be more our thing. Final two books, and again, heavy topics in these ones. There's a lot of heavy topics, which I really enjoyed. But I had quite a lot of moments where I'm like, I just need to breathe. And one of them I picked up because I was drawn to I felt like I wanted to kind of get back into this story again. I initially picked this up. So this is Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars by Kai Chen Tom. And I was originally going to read this in December as part of the Reindeer Readathon. But when I started reading it, it was very surreal kind of in the beginning. It's magical realism. And it was just kind of on that I don't know if this is supposed to be like real life or if this were in some kind of like fantasy world kind of thing here. I don't quite, my brain couldn't quite wrap itself around it, and it just felt not the right time for me to be reading it. So I put it back and I chose something else for that prompt. It was due to go back to the library, but I was like, I want to kind of see more where it was going. And as I started reading it, I was like, yes, my mind is working for this now. My brain gets it. And I'm so pleased that I continued reading it, because look, it's a tiny book, but it's so powerful. It was so powerful. So the magical realism works so well with this story because it's part metaphor. So it's kind of used to highlight how you feel in certain situations. And it really kind of works with having it as kind of a fantastical side of things. So we follow our protagonist, who is a trans girl, leaving home and going to the Streets of Miracles. Yeah, the Street of Miracles. And in there, she goes on her journey, starts to find out more about herself. And there is a lot of kind of, I'd say possibly like suppressed trauma. There's a lot of pent up anger that she has. And there's so much kind of metaphor in here, but it works so beautifully in the story because it really conjures up and you really kind of get where she's coming from, because obviously this is absolutely not my lived experience at all. But the empathy that I had, and just how I could see this being so true for so many people who are trans, just the things they go through and experience, and how the most heartbreaking part is knowing that. So one of the things they do is that they find dead trans girls. They find a dead trans girl, and it's barely makes the news. And it's very much, again, coming back to that idea of what is a human life worth, like, and different value people will place on different humans' lives. And a dead trans girl, especially a non-white dead trans girl, would be the bottom of society's pile of what is worth the most. And it was so tragic the way it was looked at and explored in here, because it's true. We know this is happening in our world at the moment. This is currently going on. People do not care about dead trans girls. They don't make the news. There's no big public outcry. They're written off as sex workers. You know, they're written off as being in a bad neighborhood, or it's seen as normal to some people, and it's appalling. And you felt that in here. You really just felt all of that in here. There were so many moments where it just felt so powerful. I just had to kind of like close the book and just go, okay, because I felt upset, I felt angry, and if that is my reaction to it, I can't imagine the reaction of people who have got much more of an emotional investment in this and can like see themselves or see people they know in this. I absolutely recommend this book. I think you have to kind of click yourself into the right mindset. It did, when I was reading it, it did remind me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, just because there's a, like, you know how people will like try and help a beached whale or cleaning up after like an oil spill and like go and cleaning all the birds' feathers with like fairy liquid and stuff. It had that kind of idea of them going down to like help mermaids in the recycling plastic infested sea. So you can't, that's where one of the scenes of the story kind of first starts. You know, that sometimes there's just, you can't fix this, you can't change this, so try and put your efforts into something else. And like there's just things like that kind of just reflect in this, so it just uses that magical realism so well to tell the story. And I really enjoyed the range of characters that we got in here and the range of experiences we got in here. there's so many beautiful moments in here, and there is it has moments of being harsh, it has moments of being lyrical, there's fragments of poetry in here, and it's just I really recommend it. In the acknowledgements, the author acknowledges that they really love the cover, and I'm very happy for them. But I would love there to be another cover for this book that could really give it more mass market appeal, because I really think it's such an important story that I think more people should read. And I just don't think the cover conveys it. The cover feels very trippy, which it is a little bit, but I want a more powerful cover. I want a more empowering cover. And I want a more striking cover, because all the different images, whilst there are certain parts that they come from in the story, absolutely, there isn't anything that like pulls you in as one image and says, read this. And that's what I want this book to have. Okay, I've gone on for a massive tangent talking about the cover, but really enjoyed it, really powerful read it, I think is basically the summary of that one. And if I were to go in more of this, it would be me wanting to read out little extracts, and this is definitely one that I felt I wanted to put some like sticky tabs in, just because there were so many like poignant moments that I wanted to say those words aloud again, and I didn't, because the end of January felt very rushed trying to get my last few books in and completed for all the buddy reads and things that I was doing, because I wanted to be fresh for February. But this is definitely on my list of books that I want to own at some point, because I got it from the library. Finally, I'm gonna have a break and have some more tea. The tea is cold, but it's liquid. So finally, I finished The Vanishing Half. This was the last book I finished in January. This is by Britt Bennett, and it is a historical fiction from the late 1960s to the late 1980s. And it's a generational story. It follows two different generations. It follows 4 different women and the different way their lives go. I enjoyed this. It's really hard to describe. I didn't know what I was expecting going in, and I think if I'd read this last year, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much, because I think I would have wanted more of I think I would have wanted more of a fight, like a rights fight going on. I think that's would have been where I was coming from before. But what this is, it's a really quiet book, and it's just exploring the way different people's lives take them. And yes, there is definitely a racial aspect to it, but it is much more about the families and kind of their journey, and kind of looking at like the psyche of them and what brought them to these different places. And it's very much about the kind of the individual stories, rather than kind of any like general social issue. I feel there's definitely, you know, you can't read it and not be aware of social issues, because this does explore colorism in particular in this book, but very much kind of more at the individual level of the 4 protagonists in here, and their different journeys and the different things that they go through, and kind of the hurt and the pain and the joy and the satisfaction that they get from life. Pardon me. So going into this book, I knew it was inspired by the classic Passing, which I read a few months ago. I really enjoyed Nella Larson's writing, she's the author of Passing, and I was very excited to read that. But for me, when I did read Passing, I kind of wanted it to go in one direction. It didn't really continue in that direction. So I definitely feel there's like a first part and a second part to the story Passing, where the first part is meeting up all very light skin-toned black women that could pass for white. One of them is married and is to a black man living in the black community, and another is married to a white man who doesn't realise that she is black. And there's this amazing scene of him coming home to what he presumes are white women in his lounge, and actually they're all black. and it's just such an interesting conversation that they have, and the different feelings that they had, and how our protagonist that we're following, her thought process, feels a certain way and feels a certain way about the characters, but then when she leaves and speaks to the characters, they had her same feelings but just acted in different ways. And I just found that really fascinating, and I wanted to kind of explore more of that. And then what we end up doing is we end up kind of going down more of a marital road, and there is kind of themes of feeling a sense of loss, like not really fitting into the society, even though you chose to kind of go that way, feeling a sense of loss within it. But it does feel more that it goes down this kind of marital road, which wasn't the direction I wanted it. I wanted it to be much more about kind of like a female friendship, and you know, exploring the issues of race and things like that, and that's not where it went. So I think because of that, going into the Vanishing Half, I left any expectations I had at the door when I opened this book. And I'm pleased that I did, because I could really then appreciate like just the quiet story that Brit Bennett wanted to tell about where these women came from, the choices they've made, what influenced them, how trauma can affect you so much in here. I think most people reading this book will definitely resonate with some characters more than others and have empathy for some characters more than others. But even though you do, I think it is really fascinating exploring people's choices and kind of where that takes them on kind of like an emotional and mental journey, and how that kind of reflects on their character and how it shaped who they came to be. And it also, you can't help thinking about what could have been if the family unit was a family unit and stayed together, like how they could have supported each other and helped each other. And there's certain kind of similarities and differences between them all. And I just found that really, really interesting. I really enjoyed this because I had such a strong emotional connection to some of the characters. So if you really don't want to know anything about this book, then please do skip ahead to the next bit, because I want to talk mild spoilers, just where I kind of mention characters' names and which ones I enjoyed and why I enjoyed them and which ones I didn't so much. Okay, off you go. Bye-bye. So I really liked the character Desiree, who we meet at the beginning of the book, where she is escaping domestic abuse. And I really connected with her daughter Jude, and I just thought it was just so sad, and how much she had to deal with, like, one, growing up in an abusive household, two, suddenly having to leave her home and everything she knows and going to this bizarre place where the whole society is so colorist, it's ridiculous. Like, the place that the protagonists come from is a place called Mallard, where it is a society built up of many like light-skinned black people, and they value the lightness of that skin. So Desiree comes back, and she married a black man, and her child Jude is very, very black. And sadly, this leaves her to have a really difficult life growing up in Mallard, because she feels so outside. She feels so ostracized, and she is bullied, and such an emotional abuse in there, and her self-worth level is really low, despite the fact that she has a loving family behind her. And there was a moment kind of with her, for want of a better word, stepdad, that just really pulled on my heartstrings. It's literally just a sentence. But it was just showing that there was this lovely little connection between those two in that moment, and how he was looking after her, and it was just really lovely. But luckily Jude does go on to leave the town and just absolutely thrive outside of the town, and I absolutely loved her relationship that she starts. It's a really beautiful relationship. So she meets a trans man at a party, and they both there's an initial attraction between both of them, and then they are immediately like open with each other about what it's been like for them growing up, and kind of how they've both felt ostracized. So this was in the 70s or the 80s? I think must have been the 80s. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, it's 1978. So Rhys is not out to everyone as trans. He is passing for quite a lot of it, no doubt because of the social difficulties and safety that would be needed. But I think there's some fantastic parallels that are kind of shown throughout the story when you compare Rhys and Jude's relationship to the relationship of Stella, who passes as white and marries and basically just pretends she's white, and then a lot of her life is then focused on protecting this lie for her general safety. And given everything that kind of she'd gone through, you understand to a certain extent why. And I think what the author does is she shows in a really good way, this is why my characters made the choices they did, without commenting on whether or not she agrees with those choices. And I really appreciate that. Like, it's very much like, this is what happened, but you're not pushed or pulled in any way to go, this person made the right choice, this person made the wrong choice. You're very much left to form your own opinions. Like, you're just given the story. And I thought that was really powerful. So yeah, that's why there's a lot like to do with kind of like the psychology behind all the characters here. It's really, really well done. Also, I think Britt Bennett's writing is really, really good, because there is one chapter follows Jude meeting Rhys and Jude and Rhys getting together. And just that one chapter was basically like their relationship. And I was so invested in it. So the point of the difficulties they kind of went through, not from not communicating, but just not having the right words to express themselves. Like, they were trying to communicate. And I think that's one of the things I really liked. But they also, and then you see them like to the point of them finally getting together, and like the delight I felt of them finally getting together, and I'm like, wow, this has only been a chapter. I just thought that was brilliant. You get to see, so the whole premise of this is that two twins have run away to New Orleans, and then at one point one of the twins, Stella, just disappears, and the other twin, Desiree, has no idea where she is. Stella goes on to continue to pretend to be white and live this white life, and Desiree marries a black man, but unfortunately she's in an abusive relationship, so she goes back home. So she has a very dark-skinned daughter, and Stella has a very light-skinned daughter who thinks she is white. And then it is about sort of like the path crossing and the different directions that these two cousins take, as well as the different directions the sisters take. So it very much kind of like focuses on choices and where you end up, rather than focusing on any kind of like family reunion or rebonding kind of moment. So if you're looking for kind of a plot of that, that's not what this book is about. It's very much kind of a reflection than looking at a plot. And I think there were lots of, you could see different glimmers of the characters sort of in each other, and sort of like family traits in here. And it was just really interesting to read. And again, this kind of perception and judgment and ingrained societal racism, and also like ingrained racism that you take into your heart as well. Like, if you, like, Jude had to work a lot at believing she was worth something, because she'd been told from the society she was in for so long that she wasn't. And the same with Rhys as well. He'd been told that he wasn't worth something because he's trans. And just seeing these characters grow and work together and kind of build was just so beautiful and hopeful and life affirming. So that was really great. There were some nice friendships in here as well, so it was really felt for Jude. There were also some really lovely moments as well, like back in Mallard with Desiree and her new relationship and her mum. and exploring all of that. And then you see kind of the loneliness and isolation as well from Stella, and also her daughter Kennedy. So it's really fascinating to read and see all of those, and it is definitely something that I would read again, and would be interested to kind of, I feel like I'd get more the second time around as well. I think Stella, although I don't empathise with her and kind of connect with her as much as I do with the other two, she carries a kind of a lot of guilt that she has taken this privilege, and there's kind of a part of her that's torn between being terrified of black people because they'll recognize her and know what she's doing, and then they have like the power of this secret, but also kind of wanting to, knowing that there's something important there that she's missing out on by cutting herself off from her family and the black community. She feels like she is missing something, and so she is kind of there's a part of her that sort of yearns towards that as well. So that's kind of within conflict, that's kind of conflicting within herself, which is really interesting. So yeah, I did really enjoy reading this. I really enjoyed the chat, because this was a buddy read with Marie from Read Spine Books, and Tara from Tara Talks Books, and Talia from Bandana Book Mum is just starting to read this now, and Tiffany from Towering TBR had already read this, so it was really nice to kind of have that chat going as well. And hopefully we are going to be up for reading some more kind of generational stories too, so that'll be fun. Okay, we're nearly at an hour. Anyone who is not interested in hearing about what I read for my children, I'm just going to talk through that. But thank you for watching. Please feel free to chat in the comments below about any of the books that I've spoken about, or tell me how your January's been going. You know I love a chat, and I'm now going to chat briefly about my children's books. So I have been reading with my Mad March Hare. We read a chapter each night from a chapter book, sometimes a little bit more, especially if we know it's the end. And this is what we've been reading. So we have finally finished the seventh book in the How to Train Your Dragon series, which is by Cressida Cowell, and it is a middle grade fantasy. So it feels like it's definitely got links to historical Norse and the Vikings, and there is a book that looks at the Romans as well, but dragons are also real and part of the culture, and there's kind of a lot of stereotypical kind of looking at what we think of as Vikings and kind of these barbaric warriors, and the joke is that the future son of the tribe, Hiccup, is not strong and muscly and has no interest in doing that, and he's very learned and academic, and can speak to dragons, so he gets to talk to dragons in Dragonese, which is the language of dragons. You also get some recurring characters from different tribes. You have a really lovely friendship between Hiccup and his best friend Fishlegs, and Kamikaze, who is from another tribe, and they always end up finding themselves in kind of peril and on an adventure, and it's always fun to kind of see how it's going to play out. So this one, they apparently discover America in this one, and there is a swimming competition, and it's set on a lot of boats, and this is just really fun. I really enjoyed Cressida Cowell's writing. All of it is illustrated by her as well, so you get these really kind of black and white, sort of slightly crazy illustrations, I think. So you've got ones of dragons, and I always really enjoy that you've got like a caption around it, or like some writing around the drawings as well, that I think adds to them. So this was really fun. I always enjoy reading these with my son, and we had a great time sort of not knowing, and there were lots of times where he was like, no, you can't leave it there, and I'm like, right, I'll read the next 2 pages so you know what's going to happen to the character, but then I'm going to put it back. And what we're currently reading, we've only just started reading, and it's the final Amelia Fang book by Laura Ellen Anderson, who writes the Rainbow Grey series, which if you know me, you know I love. So this was her first series she wrote. So these are a little bit younger. They are in the 5 to 8 age range. And there is a fantastic amount of pictures to words quantity. So you get some double pages where it is just words and a pattern on the outside, but most pages there is an illustration on them. So this is set in the fantastical land of Nocturnia, which is kind of like a vampire werewolves, what else have we got? Beasts, not beasts, Yeti, rare breed of Yeti. She's got a friend who is the son of the Grim Reaper. So it's all that kind of like Halloween-esque, but kind of like cozy Halloween-esque, and like they eat revolting food and it sounds disgusting. And you also hear about the Kingdom of the Light. And yeah, some of the story, there is an order to the stories. But generally they tend to read as kind of like standalones, but definitely like the first 3. There is kind of like a link to all of them, but it's just fun adventures each time, and this is the last one and we're both really enjoying it, and it's so funny to hear my son. There's a lot of puns that happen in these, so it's so funny to hear my son just absolutely laughing at some of the use of words in here. Okay, on to my little Doormouse. He's just started insisting on reading chapter books. So my Mad March Hare has got a large collection of Beast Quest. So these are lots of thin books. Again, there's some illustrations, but not a huge amount. But there is a lot of the writing is quite big on the page. So it's they're quite easy. They're very sort of easy to read chapter books, and they are definitely aimed at the children of their age. So it's a fun adventure aimed at the children, that they will just continue to feed on, for want of a better word. So I read the first one with my eldest, and then he continued to read the rest to himself. My youngest, I don't feel is quite there, but he really wants to read them, and he has been taking in the story more than I originally thought he was, so that's really good. So as long as he wants me to read them to him, I will just continue to read them to him. But he is also enjoying his picture books, and this is one that has been popular recently. This is Sue Potato. So Sue Potato is by Sue Hendra and Paul Lynette, and they collaborate on both the story and the illustrations. So as we can see, this is Sue Potato here. There is many books about Sue Potato. It's all set in a vegetable aisle, and Sue Potato is the hero of the story. And there are lots of vegetable friends, and often there's some sort of plot where they need being rescued, and the plot is usually done due to the villain of the story, which is the evil pea, because some vegetables should be frozen for a very good reason. And this one was brought out at Christmas time, and it is basically a pantomime. So I think if you hadn't read any of the other stories before this one, it wouldn't make sense. But what's really nice is on the flaps, you get the evil pea as Jack, Sue Potato as Jack's mum. So we've got Sue Potato in the best role, the Panto Dane here. The aubergine and carrot as Daisy the cow, Mystic Mango as himself, and a glorious mystery guest. And you will get the kind of the little funny humour if you have read some of the other books. But if you haven't, then you will just enjoy this fun retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk. And this is really cute, because look, we take off the cover, and we've got this beautiful, like, on the hardback printed edition of the Beanstalk just in space, and loads of random characters. So the melting ice lolly here is never mentioned in this story, but it is a character we have seen randomly pop up in the freezer in other Sue Potato books. So yeah, and the fish fingers, they're kind of like the prison guards for the freezer, and will always escort the evil pea back into it. Random rubber ducky, because why not have a random rubber ducky? And what my children really loved is here we have the Easter Bunny, who is not in this story at all, but there is a Easter story which features the Easter Bunny. So lots of little fun things like that popping up. And it's just a really enjoyable story that really just appeals to the children. And my eldest still really loves these stories, and we will read these as a family. So they were always up to, I put the cover on upside down. They're always up to hear all about Sue Potato, and I enjoy them as well. Lots of kind of pun humour, and often a little bit zany, and nice beautiful illustrations. And there's kind of like a cartoon style where the page will kind of be broken up into different sections as well, which is always fun. And you generally tend to have a page in each book So there's always like a, what's the word, like a catchphrase. So there's always a moment where it's Super Tato to the rescue. And obviously it's not just Super Tato in this one, it's Super Mum, because Super Tato is being the dame. So that is some of the stuff that I've been reading with my children. And they both seem to continue to love reading, which gives me so much joy. It's my parenting goal achieved. That's one of the things I really wanted to be able to share with them. Wow, this is a long video. If you stuck with it to the bitter end, do a spud for Super Tato. Give me a little potato. That'd be cool. If you haven't got anything else to say, if you want to chat to me, then please do. You know I love a chat. And I hope you have a wonderful time in February reading all the good books. Happy reading, everyone.